there's a deep-seated mentality that's wrong, in my opinion, that all technology is morally neutral. I think that's a fundamentally flawed assumption. All technology has some motive behind it. Just to say that technology is a tool, you can use it for good or you can use it for bad, is a very naive way to approach technology. There's going to be some kind of exit that families will have to take unless they want to continue going down this road.
Hi, welcome to the Family Teams podcast. Our goal here is to help your family become a multi-generational team on mission by providing you with biblically rooted concepts, tools, and rhythms. Your hosts are Jeremy Pryor and Jefferson Bethke, and we can't wait to chat about all things family.
Everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm here once again, my friend Rory Groves. Rory, I'm really excited about this new project you guys are kicking off, and I want to hear all about it. It's on Kickstarter, and we backed it, Henry and the Great Society. It's a book you guys are republishing. So kind of walk me through what the book's about and what motivated you guys to jump into this project.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks again for having me back. It's good to be back on the show. Really appreciated. Since the last time I was on, we've heard from a lot of folks that were following along on building their own family economies. And so it's been really neat. And I appreciate you just allowing me to be a guest on the show.
Absolutely.
Just kind of taking it from the top, this book, it was originally written several decades ago. I think it was over 50 years ago that it originally came out, and it's kind of fallen out of print. You can find used copies here and there and things like that. And so it's kind of one of those books lost to time. But the book, Henry and the Great Society, is just in a nutshell, it's about a farm family that's in roughly kind of the mid 20th century. So like the 40s, 50s. And this is just about the time where, America is modernizing, of course, and all of the modern conveniences that we're used to today, all the electricity, the plumbing, the gadgets, the automobiles, the paved roads, all of these things that we just kind of take for granted today, we're just beginning to make entrances into some of the more remote rural locations of America. And so this story it's a fictional story, but it's a true to life, you know how that is, of kind of an author's recounting of his own experience growing up as modern times, modern conveniences begin to make their way. And it describes how this family is impacted one little convenience at a time. And not only this family, and there if it's, something like a fifth generation farm family that always had everything they ever needed right on the farm, and had done so for, going back to as far back as this author could remember. But the whole community, it's fascinating to see how small little enhancements in technology and in convenience and in money and what it did to a whole community, and really came in on the promise of how much their lives could be improved if they would adopt these new things. But really what ended up happening is it was robbing these families and this community of the relational types of integrity and the bonds and the truly valuable things that make life meaningful in exchange for, stuff. It's kind of like, it's the essence. So, even me describing it this far, here we are, we're a family. We moved to a farm 13 years ago. We started building a home economy. I started involving my family. We started inviting others, and we're like, hey, this simpler life, there's actually a lot here. And yeah, it's not necessarily a materialistic life. It's not, there's not gobs of money waiting for you on the farm, but there's something else that's really valuable. And the way it brought our family together has been, our heart cry since the beginning, since we've been trying to share this aspect of a simpler life with folks. And so when I came across the story, it was essentially like, this is what we were trying to communicate to people of how could we order our lives and our families, our professions. My main focus is on a professional life that involves your family, the family economy. How could we do it in such a way that builds up families, not just make it about the paycheck or the status? And I know a lot of people, they don't just want to make it about the paycheck. I get that. But if you read an account of what it was like before all of this modern, encroachment, it's a very sobering story, and it really makes not just us think, but we've come into contact with so many other families that have either read of it or heard of it, or we shared it with them, and it really made a deep impact on their families to consider the impact that technology is having and that modern conveniences we're having, in undoing the things that really brought life meaning in the first place. So that's kind of the initial,
Okay.
what the story's about. I don't want to give away the plot too much, but
Okay.
it's a cautionary tale is how I would describe it. And it's one of those things when you read it, you realize you see yourself in the story and you realize just how much you've been caught up in a lot of this as well.
Mm, man. Yeah, I love those stories that take us into an inflection point in the
Mm.
past when a generation had to make a decision to go one way or the other. We are the recipients of their decision to go one way,
Exactly.
and we were born in their world, and we don't
Yeah.
remember, or we weren't a part of, we didn't get a vote on the decision or the fork they decided to take. And so the
Mhm.
only way to go back to that fork in the road usually is just to go through kind of a historical archaeology.
Hmm.
Like, you got to go back into the past. There's a couple of, shows that I think of that are of this vein. So, Downton Abbey, a lot of people are watching that.
Mm.
That's like this inflection point right before World War One, when the UK was going through this crazy inflection point between kind of the ancient world of the aristocracy and these different class systems that they had in
Mhm.
England, and what they have today, which is totally different. But it was really that moment where a lot of that stuff was being sorted out. There's also a movie, I don't know if you've ever seen this one, Rory. It's called Avalon. It's a fantastic movie about this inflection point that happened. An immigrant family that comes to the United States. They are totally a multi-generational family. They're all working together, and then you watch over the course of about
Mm.
50 years, the generations just kind of dissolve
Hmm.
as they bring in TVs into their home and they
Yeah.
start adopting all these technologies. And it's a sad story, but it's also a great movie. If anybody hasn't watched it, I highly recommend it. Just it's a great discussion point. And so,
Mm.
yeah, I find these really interesting. So these inflection points, and you've got Henry the Great. And I'm kind of curious about the title.
Yeah.
Kind of why does he call it the Great Society? What is that referring to there?
So that's good. And by the way, that story you said with Avalon, I haven't seen the movie, but it sounds like it's a very similar premise of
Okay.
how some of these things came in and kind of ended up replacing something that was better, on the promise of being better, of being the good things in life. But to that point, Henry's name, the main character in the book, he's the father of this farm family,
Okay.
and uh, he's experiencing, the slow and gradual changes of modernity. And so the Great Society is kind of a term for just all of the 20th century innovations that came into really a
Okay.
simple, self-sufficient way of life that had been, the normal way of life for the previous 400 years in American
Yeah.
history. And, so that's it's just kind of a general term for, the Great Society, all of the modern conveniences and advances, and automobiles replacing your horse and buggy, and tractors replacing, the plow horse, and, TVs replacing story time around the fire with mom and dad. These, you can kinda get a sense of it. It was all of it happening all at once, all across America, and again, when you see it and you begin to evaluate your own life against it. Now we're here, and this is what I've said, is that this author was a prophet. I mean, when he was saying these things, they were happening. They had just finished happening. The book was originally published in the 60s, so it was very recent memory, and everyone reading it would have seen themselves in it. But now we're 50 years later,
Yeah.
and none of those promises of the Great Society have come true. We're now deeper into this immersive tech world and social media, and we have, all of these maladies of mental health issues,
Yeah.
and people are more isolated. I mean, it speaks very profoundly to our situation. And what I like about the book, and what really gave us, so when I came across it, I felt like, well, first of all, I would love to share this book with everyone that we're connected with, because it's, Gather and Grow, our ministry is about reversing these trends. These are the problems that we're trying to address, is the fragmentation of the family. And so I felt like this would be the perfect tool to put into people's hands to do that, to begin the conversation of how do we, how do we recognize the kind of snares that we've become accustomed to, but also what do we do about it?
Yeah.
The book, it doesn't really answer that question.
Mm.
It's a story.
Yeah.
And everyone's story is going to be different of how you find your way out of, Exodus, if you will.
Yeah.
There's going to be some kind of exit that families will have to take unless they want to continue going down this road.
Yeah.
And so one of my desires was to add a chapter to the end of the book, like add an afterword, and begin to share some of the things that people are doing and what we're doing in order to try to give people some practical steps to begin reversing these trends. So it's both a tool for conversations, but also I really am hoping that it will begin to give people some hope for the future if they can begin to take some serious steps and be inspired by what other families are doing.
Awesome. Man,
Yeah.
so needed. Well, I think it'd be good to go maybe a layer deeper into the problem. So let's get a little more depressed before we talk about solutions. By the way, if you guys aren't, there's a Kickstarter. You can go to Kickstarter or go to gatherangrow.us if you want to back Henry and the Great Society and get this beautiful book that's coming out in the spring. So we backed it. We're so excited to see this come out. I cannot be more pumped about a project like this, because these are the kinds of stories that people really need to heighten their intuitions. But I want to talk to you and ask you, Rory, about this. There is an intuition that I'm trying to understand the root of it. And that is the intuition that you're describing that sort of says, hey, isn't a car just a faster than the horse? Or isn't, you look at any convenience that we have, that we experience, and just say, oh, it's solving, the telephone is solving a problem of like letter writing. And then the email is solving the problems. It's just it's a better way to communicate. Everything's just better. Our intuition is it's faster, it's more convenient, therefore it's better. So we have that deep intuition. And so it doesn't matter how bad things get. People always seem to think, well, we just need an even more advanced technology. That where does that intuition come from? And what are we missing is there any way to kind of sort of put a new intuition into our minds to help us evaluate these technologies that are coming at us? Could we just swallow them wholesale because it seems like, oh, it's a dishwasher. Everything makes things faster and more convenient. Isn't that always better? How do we evaluate these things as they're coming online?
So, I'm glad you asked that question, because that is this book. This entire book is bringing that question up of evaluating the impact of technology and advancement and all of these kinds of things. Let me jump back, and then I want to jump into the answer to that. So you mentioned the Kickstarter. So what we're doing is we're doing a crowdfunding campaign to raise support to publish the book. But also, we felt this was the right time for us as a ministry to begin publishing more resources on this topic. And so we're using this as an opportunity to start a publishing house with Gather and Grow.
Oh, nice.
So that's the reason for doing it this way, rather than just sending it off to the printer and having some copies done up. We really want to begin a whole new facet of our ministry and begin to help families on a more practical level with this. So, but to answer that question, I think there's a deep-seated mentality that's wrong, in my opinion, that all technology is morally neutral. I think that's a fundamentally flawed assumption. All technology came from somewhere. It came out of somebody's mind or some team of people's minds, and it has some motive behind it. So just to say that technology is a tool, you can use it for good or you can use it for bad, is a very naive way to approach technology. And I would say that's probably the first fundamental intuition that people have. Different authors have written quite eloquently on this. Wendell Berry, Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. He talks about the entrance of television and what that's done to society. Fundamentally changed the way that we communicate with each other as a society. And every one of these technologies is going to do something like that. So one of the things I think that's at the heart is we've been divided and conquered as a people. We used to make decisions as communities. We don't do that anymore. We make them as individuals. And without some kind of governing effect of a community, what kind of impact will bringing, say, a Walmart into a small town, what will that do to our town? For example, like those are conversations that a lot of small towns used to have. Hardly anyone has that conversation anymore. It's just kind of taken for granted. Well, Walmart's bigger, cheaper, faster, you know, it's better. Therefore, it's better. Well, it's better if you measure one metric, which is the bank account or, cash flow or things like that. It's not necessarily better if you measure things like the relationships inside of a family or a social capital in a community of people depending on multiple different businesses and business owners and supporting each other for a way of life. If you measure things besides just the profit or the economics of it, actually, I wouldn't even say economics, because really relationships need to be considered in the economy. If we burn out all of our relationships, we will not have an economy in which to transact business. There has to be a basic level of mutual trust. So it doesn't just reduce down to money. And I think that that's what has happened as we've begun to become more autonomous and individualized. Our consumer transition from a producer society to a consumer society. We're looking on very surface level preferences, and everyone is marketed to on an individual level. So I think all of those things have culminated in what the intuition that you're describing today is, that we don't live as communities. We don't live as groups. We don't see ourselves as part of a group. We see ourselves as me, myself, and I. And therefore, the quick calculation is the dollar at the bottom of the ledger.
Yeah. So,
and that's about all that we go for.
Okay. So yeah, the idea that we've reduced to a single major metric, and as long as that's going up, you can see this with nutrition, right? You're like, oh, as long as we get a calorie as cheap as we can get it, we can, it doesn't matter the fact that there's all these nutrients, all these minerals are missing. We've reduced it to this one thing, and therefore, it's good enough, and we can see what it's doing to our bodies. Well, there's something happening to our communities, that level of reduction. There's something you said, though, that I don't think I've really explored much. You said we've been divided and conquered because these decision-making bodies have ceased to function, and now we have been reduced to being individuals, marketed to, and that has left us open to these communities that are out there, like very, very sophisticated teams, billions of dollars coming in, and it's just not a fair fight. Like they're coming in, the Walmart team is saying, we're going to put a Walmart here. They've got all this incentive. They've got their consultants. They've got their team. They're ready to rock. They're ready. They're throwing money around. And there used to be, to face that, a fair fight between, okay, yeah, you've got your desires, what you want to do, but we have our community's plan and what we want to do. And it seems like, I'm curious how that has broken down. What used to exist that would have stopped this kind of thing from happening? What's the alternative vision, and why is it that we fall prey so easily to being divided and conquered as individuals, like you described?
These are great questions. I really like this podcast. I'll just give you my opinion on that. You have to keep going back. The archaeology comes into play here. You have to keep digging deeper to another layer and say, how did we get here? We did not get here. This did not start in the 50s. I mean, advertising in earnest started probably in the 20s or so, like the kind that we see today. This goes way back. And you've heard me write and talk about the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And it really even goes back deeper than that. But let me touch on a couple of things. First of all, the role that the church plays in modern society is vastly reduced. 150, 200 years ago, the church community, whatever the community was, whatever the denomination was, it would have had a pivotal role in bringing thought leaders together to discuss and weigh these kinds of decisions. And I'll give you one example of that is we still have it around today, but that'd be the old order Amish and some of these Anabaptist communities.
Yeah.
They do this still to this day. And now we look at them and say, well, for sure, they're way backwards and they're not. But I would wager, if you go in and test, if you could measure the health of their relationships in their families and in their communities and hold that up against a typical American neighborhood, I think you'd see a pretty vast difference, even if we don't agree that, they should have electricity or something like that. But my point is larger is they take it seriously as a faith community. They have a reason, they have an ethic for why they're making the decisions that they're making. That used to be the case for all of America.
Mm.
Everyone who was belonged to some kind of community, even if it wasn't a faith community, they had their local villages, and they made decisions together about these things. That was a natural firewall to some. Like, you would never be in some corporation, Lloyd's of London or something, wouldn't have been able to just come set up shop in the Pilgrims' Plymouth colony. None of that stuff could have happened unless it was something that was deemed a good for the whole community. What happened as we industrialized, it first started to impact the families, but it also impacted the communities because it began to individualize work. It no longer work was a team effort, it was an individual effort. We needed someone to pull this lever or to, weave this loom or to whatever, dig this coal. And it began to break down that mindset that life and production and work is supposed to be a community effort. Farming, we used to be farmers. So now 98% of the nation, more than that probably, aren't involved in agriculture at all. But at one point, we were like 90% of us were farming. And farming is a very natural community type of vocation. I mean, you need help if you're farming. And it's very obvious that you depend on each other. Well, as our work changed, all of these things began to shift and change. And I think that's where it just was one long train from becoming a producer society to a consumer society, coming from a community-based sufficiency where you had to basically raise and produce everything you needed within a community, a village of people, to becoming, I'm just going to order it on Amazon and a drone's going to drop it off, like in 24 hours. That is one long continuous line.
Yeah.
And I think it didn't happen with one thing, but I think it was a series of a million decisions in that direction.
I see. Yeah. When I think about what happened, there's sort of like this perfect storm of things that occurred. The economic separation that you're describing, or where these bonds, these natural bonds were dissolved, and now we're individual cogs that get stitched into larger corporate machines, and this has really wreaked havoc. So there's the economic, there's the theological one that you described as well, that there was sort of an understanding that we existed in a theological community where let's have conversations. Even the word ecclesia was primarily used in Greek as a governmental body, and it seems like we sort of lost that part of what the church is all about, ecclesia being the Greek word for church. I'm curious what your thoughts are about the philosophical reasons, because there's one thing that every time I try to broach this topic, if you were to go to a group of people and say, hey guys, look what's happening to us, we're being divided and conquered. And you can convince them sometimes of the economic argument. Hey guys, let's start to function more like a family team. Let's create an engine of economic productivity inside the family. We've been successful having those conversations with some families. But I would say that what I slam up against, which is really, really hard to overcome, I'm curious what your thoughts are about this, is the philosophical assumption that freedom is the ultimate value, and that anything that reduces personal individual freedom is just intuitively wrong. And that is so deep inside of the ethos of Western culture. And I'm curious how you work on that, or how you collided with that, because you have in the Constitution, families never mentioned even a single time in the U.S. Constitution. We are seen or perceived as individuals by that document. And I think that over time, there has been this, the one value that we as Americans can all agree on is high, and I do think it's a high value, is freedom. Freedom is very important. And our sort of national mythology is all obsessed with lifting up this single value. I think the problem is that even in the founding of America, if you were to ask most of the founding fathers, what is the highest value in your life, your family, I don't think they would have said freedom. I think freedom to them was something that was really important for the government to value, so that we can get on doing the things that are really important to each of us, which to them were much more important, that their faith was way more important to most of them than this value of freedom. But today, it's the one thing that kind of stitches us together. And I think therefore, because we can agree on how its importance, it somehow has like made its way up the hierarchy, so that when you have these conversations and say, hey, let's like fight the Walmart, people are like, well, no, that's a violation of freedom. Hey, let's talk about like whether or not we should adopt this technology as well, who are you to say that?
Yeah.
Even as a father, who are you to tell your kids what technologies they should adopt? And I think that intuition is sort of philosophical, and it has
Yeah,
become theological.
it is. And I've got a great book for you to go look up. It's called "Freedom is Killing Our Liberty" by A.Z. Adams,
Okay.
and but he makes this exact point: is that the founders' vision for liberty, which is really what they were after, liberty,
Okay. Liberty.
um, has to be sustained within some kind of moral, ethical framework. Otherwise, what you have is you have liberty devolving into pure freedom, which is libertinism,
Mm.
which is just everyone doing what is right in their own eyes. And you ultimately end up with a tyranny because you have a strong man that has to come forward and put down the law, lay down the law, and you actually end up in captivity, in bondage. And this has happened over and over again throughout history. And so, but that's the flaw, is our idea in 2025 of freedom is not the founders' idea of liberty in 1789 or 1776. Just like our idea of individuals has radically changed. What was written for our Constitution, they were always conceiving of families as units, as whole units. Even if they didn't specify the word family, they were not speaking of individuals acting on their own accord. They were speaking of families as the base of society, of family units. Usually it was the father who would say vote on behalf or buy land, but it was always on behalf of the whole family. You only saw situations where women, for example, were involved in voting if they were not married, because they could be landowners, but they could not split up the family unit. They had to be part of a small, a miniature community called the family to participate in the larger society. So I would just say that that's one thing. Our notions of freedom is not the ultimate goal, and it's certainly not the ultimate biblical ethic, right? It's freedom within the constraints of what is right and what is wrong. And so that traces back, really, if you want to get what's the philosophical underpinning, it's the Great Enlightenment.
Mm.
If you really want to go back, it's the Great Enlightenment. It's this idea that man is the measure of all things, and man will only be perfected when we remove all of this dogma. Marx was big about that. Removing the church, removing all of this dogma that corrupts man, and allow him to flourish in his natural state. That was it wasn't. I think it was Descartes, but don't quote me on all the philosophers. I'm not that. I just have read enough to know that most of all of this that we're walking out right now started 400 or 500 years ago. That influenced the founders quite a bit, but that was shortly before the French Revolution, where we saw what the logical end result of unrestrained, immoral man, what he can do to another man.
Yes.
And so we have the different founding because our country started with the framework of a Judeo-Christian ethic. So we had this natural constraint that was constraining individuals internally. And of course we want freedom. Of course we want freedom. But people took for granted the fact that we did it within the bounds of like the 10 Commandments. I mean, there was like some basic framework that we did that. So that framework's gone. The church does not have that kind of influence anymore in cultural society, in our secular society. So now we're pushing for freedom like it's the ultimate right. But it will not, in the end, produce the freedom that people think that it will. It will ultimately end in bondage.
That's right. The Bible is so nuanced about this. It really describes the freedom's important, but it's like when Paul gets into incredible detail about the topic of freedom in Galatians, where he's saying, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Let us not be yoked again to slavery. And he describes the need to be filled with the Holy Spirit in order to truly be free, because we have inside of us sort of slavery, right? That this idea, we have an anthropology, an idea of man that is that there's a natural bent towards what's wrong, and therefore, if you just give people that kind of libertine freedom, it'll actually enslave them. That's a much more nuanced position that we have. So yeah, and I agree. We are existing in the world that Jean-Jacques Rousseau built.
That was the name. I was looking for Rousseau. Yes.
I thought that's who we were talking. Yeah.
Yes.
That he's if anybody's like wants to understand the real roots, I think of the level of individualism, Rousseau is really the philosopher. We think the thoughts of dead philosophers. The vast majority of Western people think the thoughts of Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Yeah.
And it's an absolute disaster. He is a candidate for the worst philosophical father of all time. He
Absolutely.
abandoned his children.
Yes.
His idea, the level of libertine freedom that he believed in, his life is almost a parable of where our entire
Mm.
society has been going ever since we've adopted his framework for understanding the nature of freedom and the individual. So that's a
Yeah.
disaster. We don't want that. But I want to dig into a little bit, Rory, of this solution. One of the most important and most overlooked leadership roles a man can step into is leading his own family, not by dominating, but by building intentionally with structure, vision, and consistency. That's why I want to tell you about something called the Family Teams Accelerator. It's a 12-month framework for building a home that runs on purpose instead of chaos. Each month, you'll get a short teaching, a set of tools, and a simple playbook you can walk through with your spouse. It's built for busy families, but more importantly, it's built to last. You don't need hype, you need a plan. If that resonates with you, check it out at familyteams.com/accelerator. I've been really interested, Micah 4, George Washington was famous for quoting Micah 4 constantly, right?
Mm.
And in Micah 4, he says, every man lives under his own vine, his own
Yes.
fig tree, and no one makes him afraid. I think he quoted it over 30 times when he was in
Mm.
office. He had a very clear vision for what he hoped would happen in America, which was that there would be these communities that themselves would own the means of their own livelihood, and they get to work together. And this vision has seemed to be over time replaced. So I'm curious how you think about the nature of the vision, like of the good life. Like, how do you think
Mm.
about the good life? What's kind of underpinning either the theological underpinnings of your vision for that? Yeah, where do you, how do you, and obviously this is, like you mentioned, the Henry the Good Society is really describing the destruction of that. But I think
Yes.
it's really good to take some time and build up the picture of what that
Absolutely.
could actually look like.
Absolutely. And that's the whole goal with this project in the first place is to give people hope. Okay, everybody knows there are problems in the world. We don't need to be told about that. But what a book like Henry and the Great Society can do is it can open your heart to really taking stock of things and to making changes, like substantive changes in your life that will yield good fruit and hope. But I think we need the first step in that is just to recognize where we're really at and to be very honest that the trajectory that we're on is not going to end well. If we just continue chasing the dollar, we just continue bigger, faster, cheaper.
Yeah.
This is not going to produce, it hasn't produced it to this point. So I think the first step in hope is recognizing our need and our bondage. I would just say it flat out. We're in bondage. It's like an invisible chains. So a friend of mine calls it the invisible chains of modernity. It's not until you try to wrestle against them that you recognize you're in bondage, because all of a sudden, let's just say, for example, a father doesn't want to work 60 hours a week away from his family in an office. Maybe he wants to do something at home with his children, like farming. You can't do that. Sorry. It's like, good luck. Good luck with that.
Yep.
But why? Why are we in a society where you can't choose to live off the land anymore? Well, first of all, nobody knows how to live off the land. And second of all, you can't afford it.
Yeah.
There are so many options that have been priced out of our modern life.
Yeah.
And so I think, so the first step is understanding the situation. The second step is then breaking free of it. You can't break free of bonds that you don't know you have. So here's what I would say. First of all, the genie's out of the bottle. I don't know if we'd even call it a genie. We're not going to go back to pre-industrial America. Well, not in the short term, I should say. We might go back to pre-industrial America, but that's probably another podcast. But we're not going to be able to fix the whole world. And so don't get caught. What I would say is, if you're listening to this and you're saying, well, this won't work, as a society to roll some of these things back. Will it work for your family? Is there something you can do just for yourself, just for your own clan? Okay. Don't try to solve the whole world's problems with this. Let's just start with one family at a time. And what I would say is, yes, there's a ton of freedom still for families, especially in America, that there's a lot of creative ways that you can begin to reclaim some of those lost ways of life. And I would say, for me, the big one is work. How do we work? And what you've been doing, and we've been on very parallel journeys here. But what you've been doing is to try to find ways to bring families together in a team that can, at least they can spend their working lives as much as possible together. There's also things like education. So we homeschool our children. That was a decision we made early on and never regretted it. We do things together like family worship every day, every night, almost without fail. We will gather together as a family and sing some hymns, psalms, and my son will get his guitar out now that he can play, and we'll sing some songs that way too. We'll do a little scripture reading, we'll do a prayer together. It's a family event. My children, we expect it. That's a very strong, incredibly beneficial thing that every family can do no matter where they are in life. They can do family worship together. So what I would say is begin looking at the things you can do as a family and don't worry about the larger picture. And it might not, it might take you some time to get there, to build a family team or a family economy that will actually be able to pay the bills, but it's happening all the time. We are hearing from families all over the country that are moving this direction. They're getting homesteads or they're building a family business, and they are finding success doing it. So that would be my hope I would like to leave people with.
Yeah. 100% agree. Yeah, I think that for so many people, they don't realize you can make this decision. I know that when you went to your high school guidance counselor and talked about what career, nobody said, well, would you like to form a career that you can work as a team with your family? Like, nobody asked you that. You got involved in a career as an individual. You were the divide and conquer happened to you, and you are, living way, way on the other side of that divide. You can go back, and this is what we're finding. And I agree that the family has the ability to go back like no other group. It's difficult maybe to get your whole church to go back or your whole town to go back, but your family, like, God has made you a little sovereign family. There's things that you can decide to do as a family unit and say, hey guys, let's go back. Let's do something different. And that's part of, we're creating communities. Both of our efforts here are to create communities of people that can really support each other in that decision, because
absolutely,
that is such a power move. When you do that, all kinds of things become possible. And every once in a while, if I ever get discouraged, like you mentioned, Rory, there's this little hotel up in Amish country in Ohio, and I sit there and watch the guy, like pushing, his plow with his sons. And I'm like, if he can do that, the spectrum between where the typical modern family is and where that guy's at, there's a lot of room for us to recapture things. You don't have to go all the way back to the Amish life. There's so many steps you can take to move your way back to a family-centered, family team kind of life. I think that the amount of hope for individual families is really high. And I like that you're focusing on that, because you can get really discouraged looking at the macro.
Yes. Exactly. And the other thing I would say as you're sharing this is you have no idea what kind of inspiration your family is going to be to other families who are also stuck. And they don't know, how do we know something's wrong? How do we get out of the situation? It just takes one example for people to say, there's another way. We could bring our kids home and school them at home. That's an option. Or we could have open a workshop in the garage. And father, son could work together and do something. I mean, who knows what it is, but just to have the examples, it's being a light, and that's what God uses to bring other people to find each other.
That's right.
So you find other like-minded families that are trying to walk this out, and then you've got community. You've got the starts of it, or the potential for it. And so you just continue doing what is right for your family, what you feel the Lord put on your heart to do. And it's going to inspire and encourage a lot of other people. And that in and of itself is fuel to help you keep going.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, I was just heard on a podcast a couple of days ago, David Brooks say, all cultural change happens when a small group of people find a better way to live and the rest of us copy. I was like, that's it.
That's
like
great.
That. All cultural change happens when our little families are like little laboratories. And if your little laboratory figures out a better way to live, then there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of people that will go, can you teach us how to do that? And I would love to maybe the last thing I wanted to chat with you about, Rory, is since our last conversation, we've been getting your newsletter, and one of the things I just love about what you guys have done is you've created kind of these different analog ways of communicating that I feel like so effective, but I think everyone will look at those and say, you can't do that. No, you have to, that's got to be an Instagram, you got it like, and so I'm curious how you think about attempting to open the door so people can see, what the Groves are doing without reintroducing a bunch of technology that you guys feel like might be antithetical. Like, I'm sure you guys have to draw the line. You have a website, you'd use
Yeah.
Kickstarter. Like, how do you make these decisions? Because this is so
Yeah.
difficult to figure out.
Well, I mean, with careful discernment, I guess is the same thing. I mean, there are, um, I came part of a clue to understanding who I am is I came out of the tech world. All I knew was hyper, uh, specific or tailored marketing and promotions and emails and tweets and all this stuff. That was my professional career for a long time. So when we started something like a family economy, I was like, I don't want any of that. Like, I want it to be us on a farm. I want to be picking pumpkins with my children. And the newsletter began as not, I think this is partly a key to it here. Now I'm thinking this out loud as I'm sharing
Yeah,
this.
appreciate it.
It's like, you don't know what a thing will become. So when I do something like a newsletter, it was like one evening where I said to Becca, I think it'd be fun to like put together a family newsletter and like, let's print it out and mail it to people. Wouldn't that be fun? And so, cause we were at this point, we were, like sharing here and there about what we were doing. We were inviting people to come down and learn about tree tapping and making maple syrup. But it just was kind of like, huh, that's an odd idea, but sure, what up? So we had like 30 friends that signed up, and it just was honestly like a long Christmas letter that just kept going and going and going. And, but what was really like, I just really felt something about it. It felt like it felt counter cultural and in a good way. And our kids, we could kind of help them. So part of what I'm saying, and we could help them learn to write as part of contributing and sharing what children can do in a family economy.
Yeah.
But I'm saying I didn't over strategize it. I just took one step and then took another step. And then all of a sudden it kind of like, that was going on for years before our ministry. In fact, Jeremy, like the book wasn't even an idea, Durable Trades, which is really what like opened more doors for us. That came out of me writing and reflecting about this life in the country. And I started writing, and some of those became chapters in the book later on. But again, none of it was like masterminded. It was just, it seems like this would bring our family together. That was kind of the critical litmus test of whether we did something or not. Does this bring us together?
Yeah.
Not, can we make money doing this? That's not bad. I mean, we have to pay the bills, but it didn't start with that kind of heart. And I think that's part of the reason why it's been able to grow in a sustainable way where we're at today. So the technology, to answer that question, is how, I mean, yeah, I'm not opposed to all of it. We don't use much of it because they're just, again, it's just, what's that heart? How does Instagram bring our family together? Well, it really doesn't. So you don't see us on there that much. Yeah. I don't have Facebook at all. The stuff that I am still plugged into, it just, that's my metric is I want to be present with my children, especially in the young years. And I want to be very discerning about whatever we bring in. It's got to pass a pretty high bar.
That's good. Yeah. I like kind of where you landed there. I looked at a situation. I sort of had kind of an inkling. It sounds like it started with, okay, here's something. I'll process it with my wife. See if, she's getting excited about it. And then let's just kind of see it as a family. And part of what excites me is it seems like this would be unifying for our family. And a lot of those really analog methods just involve younger children way better. I mean, you don't want to get your 8-year-old on social media.
Please
so
don't.
it's like, so if you're going to do these things as a family team, you're going to have to embrace some of these older technologies or these older methods. And if you do that and you see that, there's, and it's starting to, like, people are starting to subscribe. People are starting to like get value out of it. Yeah, that's a really good process. And so I'm sure there are probably experiments that were left on the cutting room floor for you guys.
Oh yeah. Oh, completely. I mean, our whole history is left with all kinds of failed experiments, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, at least we tried. I mean, we had fun doing it, and teaches you. I mean, that's entrepreneurship is the best teacher there is.
Yes.
Running a business, there's nothing else quite like it to teach you all aspects of being a productive adult.
Yeah.
So I absolutely, and the other thing, the newsletter itself. So I started with 30 friends and family, people in our church and things, and it was just nothing. I mean, like I said, it wasn't something that we perceived would be a part of a vocation. But it just kept growing. Like people kept passing it around, and then we started to move in towards ministry. And it was like, well, this is a perfect vehicle to describe the family economy in process, because that's what a family. It's not like it's a one and done, one size fits all formula. The family economy is a process, and if you read over the course of a couple of years, you'll see my oldest son Ivor. He's raising rabbits. And then he's moving into woodworking, and then Elsie's starting to learn fiber arts and spinning on spinning wool and then they're selling it at a fair that we host. And it's like a slice of time in our family as we're trying to build this out and learning as we go. And the newsletter itself becomes part of our economy, in the sense that we're publishing this now and it goes out to thousands of people. All just word of mouth, because there's this heart, there's this connection of like, how can we be encouraged to do the same thing?
Yes. So good. Remind people how they can get on the newsletter.
Yeah. So if you go to gatheringgrow.us,
Okay.
It's on the website there. Just scroll down to the bottom of the page. There's some button on that page you can click and you can sign up and get it. We send it out for free. We ask for donations if people would like to help offset the cost, but if you can't, we're happy to send it to you free of charge as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that the newsletter, and that's meant a lot to us. I've really enjoyed it, and yeah, it's very inspiring. So, Rory, thank you so much. If you guys, we mentioned some of the books, Durable Trades, The Family Economy, and of course this new one that's coming out, Henry and the Great Society, which you can find at Kickstarter. Yeah, any other places people can find you guys, or that you want to?
Yeah, I mean, just everything we're up to will be on gatheringgrow.us, and the Kickstarter runs through November 6th. So I'm not sure where this will drop, when this will drop, but if folks are able to get a pledge in there, it would really help us get this publishing house off the ground. And there's videos on the site. You can kind of learn more about it there. But we really appreciate it. Anyone who feels it and wants to support and kind of see more of this out there in the world, we appreciate your support.
So excited that you're doing the publishing house. I think that's a great move. And it sounds like if they miss the Kickstarter, the book will be available kind of in mid-spring of 2026.
Yeah, so we're shooting for like a May release for the public release, and if the Kickstarter will have additional benefits in it. We're going to produce an audiobook. We hit one of these stretch goals, so everyone who orders the book by November 6th will also get that free thrown in. And so it's actually become a pretty fun project in and of itself to just, as a community, I guess you could say, trying to do something together that we could definitely not do on our own. It's been a really neat experience.
Yeah, I like that about Kickstarter, the little bonuses, and it kind of gets the creative juices flowing. And
exactly,
how can we engage with people that are kind of early adopters of this? Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Rory, for jumping on here today.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Thank you for listening to the Family Teams podcast. If you're enjoying this content or have learned something new, please make sure to leave a rating and review and share with a friend. To stay up to date with our events, new content, and products, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram @Family Teams.